Martin Wilsey.
Hey, I'm Shane McGalley.
And I'm David Keener.
And this is the Hourlings podcast project. Tonight, this is kind of part two. Last week, we were talking about how to write men characters. This week, we're going to try talking about how to write women characters.
But first, a disclaimer. Look, of course, we acknowledge, and we did this last time as well, people vary greatly. But without delving into stereotypes, there are behavioral tendencies common to men and women that we can use to differentiate our characters. And as always, whatever we say is just a guide, but knowing some of these tendencies can help you make decisions about your character attributes.
All right, let me rewind my disclaimer from last time. We also acknowledge that there are non-binary characters and non-binary authors out there. We're not going to cover that in this episode, but maybe in a future episode. So there you go.
So, starting off, the very first thing I thought about when we talked about doing this episode was this thing that this was actually written about the movies, but it's called the Bechdel test. And it is, you can actually look it up on Wikipedia, or I'll put a link to it in the comments because it's actually very true. And I have the Wikipedia page up here, and I'm just going to read it to you. The Bechdel test is a measurement of the misrepresentation of women in film. The test asks whether the film features at least two women talking to each other about something other than a man. The measure sometimes is enhanced by adding that the two female characters be named in the film. So passing the Bechdel test is you got to have two female characters talking to each other about something other than a man. And ever since I read about the Bechdel test, oh my God, every time it happens, it just like sets alarm bells off for me. So that's where we're going to start this.
Like I said, it's
amazing. As an author, don't do that. Please, God, don't do that.
Well, and the corollary to that is stories. Gosh, I mean, I grew up with the books of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where women were basically there to be rescued by men.
Damsel in distress, right?
And if a man ended up transported into a fantasy world, he always fell in love and claimed the princess.
Yeah, well, let's talk about contemporary writing of new fiction today, because we could go on and on and on about pulp detective fiction, which can be fun, but it is a total thing of the past. It's modern audiences are just not that naive anymore, so we're not doing that either. So, yeah, anyways, first thing I want to talk about is like we talked about last week with the men. There is a lot of societal expectations on women, and don't be cliche or stereotypical by only clinging to those things. Women are emotional. Women are weak. Women need to be rescued. You know, don't do that bullshit. That's boring. It's too cliche. We're trying to show you how to avoid cliches, especially if you're doing world building. It becomes far less interesting in world building if you're just cliche all the way. Let's just not do that. And I think that the most notable feature when writing a woman is that I try to do is you have to make sure that your female characters have agency. And it's really kind of hard to define what I mean by that, but by having agency, they can make their own decisions. They can deal with their own consequences. They can be the master of their own destiny. If you actually just do that, a lot of the other character grows up around them appropriately. And then you can have characters that are all the way along the spectrum, but as long as they have agency, they'll seem like they're more realistic.
And they can be fighting societal pressures, or trying to be a detective in Victorian London, let's say, where that's just not done, or whatever. But I agree with Marty. Agency is a good step towards making your female character more realistic.
And I will say that there is also a danger to that too, in the sense that there's so much discussion now, especially in YA, about writing the quote strong female character. Like one of the main boxes you got to check is, do you have a strong female character? Well, number one, that's never been really defined. What is strength? Is she strong emotionally? Is she strong with her family? Is she strong in her career? Like, what do you mean? And the other thing is that it because it's so cultural, it's sort of almost becoming a cliche in itself. To write this like strong, badass, leather wearing, female character taking on zombies. That you want to be careful that you don't two-dimensionalize.
Right. In fact, it's interesting. The book I'm reading right now is by Robert Galbraith. It's called The Ink Black Heart. And one of the things I love about this is that the main female character in it is a very, very strong character. And she's also very feminine. That doesn't mean she's weak. She just happens to like being feminine. And not for a man, she likes it for herself. It's her own personality. And I find that to be really good writing.
That's interesting.
And in the way that goes in for that character.
Yeah, there's a quote that I often go back to. I read it once in a magazine and it just never left my mind. It was from a screenwriter or filmmaker named Joss Whedon. And the interviewer asked him, so, hey, why do you write these strong female characters? And his reply was, because you keep asking me that question. And I thought that was just a perfect example.
I've heard that before too.
You've heard that? Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I don't know exactly, if he meant like, that he was acknowledging kind of the cultural tidal wave of strong female characters, or because he was
I think part of the quote was, because you're still asking me questions like that,
then I'm going to keep writing characters like that. Exactly. So it's just something interesting to think about.
Well, I also find it interesting. So my wife is a legal secretary, and has been for like 30 years, and so she can recall when there were first female attorneys in some of the firms that she was working for, and the progression. So from her perspective, female attorneys started out by being very manlike. They had to be better men as lawyers than the male lawyers. But then as there became more of them, they were allowed to be more feminine, but still just as hard-nosed as lawyers. And that's just one area where there's been a progression.
Yeah, in the same vein, when you're talking about lawyers, it's really interesting how now a well-developed character can also be sexy, but a really bad character that's just there to be sexy is two-dimensional. It's like less than two-dimensional, one-dimensional. And so don't do that. Don't write female characters that their only job is to be visually sexy with no personality whatsoever.
Is this a good segue? Can I do it?
Go ahead, do it.
Okay, all right, guys. All right, so I have a good meme lined up for our viewers. There's been some dialogue, whether or not this is true can be critiqued by male authors. But there's been some dialogue that women feel that when men write women, their physical descriptions are unnecessarily sexual or sexualized. And I will go ahead. I will read what Marty puts upon the screen for us. For us, this is what not to do. But okay. All right. So this is male writers writing female characters. Cassandra woke up to the rays of the sun streaming through the slats on her blinds, cascading over her naked chest. She stretched, her breasts lifting with her arms as she greeted the sun. She rolled out of bed and put on a shirt, her nipples prominently showing through the thin fabric. She breasted.
Okay, we get it. All right, this is just bad.
She breasted boobily down the
Just from a
stairs.
writing perspective, if you're in her point of view and she's writing about, her physical attributes, it just doesn't work. It's just
Yeah,
bad.
the most amusing thing about that is that Shay's the one that found that meme.
But I will say I have seen this where, the males are writing the female character, and one of the attributes they feel they have to mention is some discussion of the woman's boob size, which,
Well, there's ways that you can actually develop characters, and it's just not women, by how people react to their physicality. In the same way that somebody would react to a guy that's 6'8" and with an 8-pack of abs, talking about the stature of a woman is exactly the same. And it's interesting that it always seems to work its way in. I don't care if it's a female author or male author, but
True.
by the end of a book, what the cup size is of the main characters. It's very interesting phenomenon, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
it just shouldn't be the emphasis.
Yeah, I know.
And it does get, if every,
I think that it's an author's job to help the reader paint a picture. The way that you paint it is what we're talking about here. That meme was just like ridiculous, but there's ways to do it that you can get right. And keep in mind that don't write all your characters to have supermodel bodies. Don't do that. That's not how people really are. And painting the picture for the reader makes it more interesting and differentiates the characters from one another. And once again, I had mentioned this last week. We're talking about the physical attributes of a woman. That's only one facet that I like to emphasize in stories. The emotional facet. Now, granted, a lot of authors write their women to be more emotional and more emotionally available than male characters, and that's fine. Just don't make them a blubbering, cliche, or don't make them a screaming Karen. Don't make them a one-trick pony emotionally and intellectually too. I mean, how many supermodel high IQ scientists in the movies have you seen lately? Way too many.
Yeah, and just like how there's the archetype of the kindly, wise old man, I'm a little bit like over the evil old woman. Like for some reason, when women become elderly, they become evil. Apparently,
my grandmother.
Well, yeah, either that or you're the grandmother. Yeah, but it's.
And while we're talking about things that shouldn't happen, not all women want to have children. That should not be their driving force of their life, to find a man and get children. I know lots of women that have had no children and are very, very happy for it.
And they might like, babysitting their sister's children, but then giving them back afterwards.
Well, on the flip side, though, I'm surprised by how few strong female characters there are that are not mothers. How often do you see, unless the story is all about the child, like, you know, rescuing the child or something with the child. It's very rare to find, you know, a strong female character that's a mother, and I think that's very ironic because those are like the strongest.
Well, I've actually read lots of books that have strong female characters that are a mother.
Yeah, I would say I would disagree with that statement, Shay. I think
Yeah.
I think you can have a strong female character who is a mother, who might do anything required to save her kids or deal with a crisis or things of that nature.
I have not seen a lot of.
Well, in YA, that's definitely true, you know, because most of the protagonists in YA are not mothers. And
Yeah, but you know, like the Laura Croft types. I mean, what's some examples of mothers you've seen that the story was not all about the kid?
The movie Aliens was really at the heart of it was about Ripley building a family.
Yeah.
With
That's a good
the guy
example.
Hicks and I believe it was Hicks and the girl Newt. She had
right. And I don't know if you knew this, but Ripley's daughter died of old age before she actually was rescued.
Oh wow.
her real daughter, yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Which is why I was really upset at the subsequent Alien movies, where you know, Alien 3 happened and most of the other characters, like, yeah, they died. You know, so as far as I'm concerned, there are no Alien 3 and Alien 4. Those movies sucked.
Yeah.
So
you're asking for examples. I just read this great book called The Hermit of Lammas Woods. It's actually book 3 in a series by Nathan Lowell. And the main character, the very well written, strong woman, is not only is she a mother, but she's older. She's in her 50s. And she is very smart and capable and is incredibly well written. I can't recommend those books enough. It's the Tanith Fairport Adventures series.
Very good. I'll look that up.
Nathan Lowell's a good writer.
Yeah, he is a good writer. Yeah, there's a ton of other examples. I just can't think of them off the top of my head of strong female characters that were mothers.
It's also sad to say that a lot of society things, social issues, put women at a disadvantage and almost make them by default an underdog in stories, particularly in fantasy settings. And I think, you know, once you have an underdog, I think you can do an awful lot with that. A strong female character showing agency in a social system that automatically treats them as underdogs. There's lots of room for stories and potential there, you know, fighting the system and everything.
Yeah, and just don't make the characters be all about the men. I don't know how else to put it. It's women are have greater depth than that.
And I especially I think, and I know this is a cliche, but I think it's still true. I think women tend to mature earlier than men. I think that it is playing out in society right now where there are actually more women going to college and getting very good college degrees than men. And, you know, a lot of men are going to college to party, and the women are out there getting you know, business degrees and finance degrees and science degrees and such. Where I think over the next 20 or 30 years, as that plays out, the white American male for sure is going to be increasingly at a disadvantage. I'm kind of annoyed with my younger counterparts.
So as we're wrapping this up, have you guys written any female characters that you really like? I guess I'll start. Give you guys a second to think about it. My most popular novel, Virtues of the Vicious, the actual protagonist in that book is a female. And she doesn't have a romantic interest at all anywhere in the book. She is not the strongest. She's not the baddest ass, thing in the planet. She has fears and makes mistakes and still manages, despite a lot of problems along the way, both physically, emotionally, and technically, managed to get the job done. And I have gotten a ton of emails about that book, specifically because the female character was written so well. I was very proud of myself for that.
That's awesome.
What about you guys? Got any good female characters in any of your stories?
Go ahead, Dave.
Sure. I have Clash by Night, which is kind of like the Monuments Men, if you've seen the movie or read the book. It's about a museum curator who is female, who ends up, due to circumstances, taking over the leadership of a mission of a team going behind enemy lines during a future war to try to save a priceless cache of paintings. So she's leading a team of museum curators and folks like herself and a team of mercenaries. Not anything that she ever expected or was ever prepared for, and does a good job at it. I had a lot of fun writing that. Lots of plots and lots of plot twists and action.
Shay, what about you?
I'm trying to think if I've ever written a female character that didn't have a romantic interest. And right now I'm saying no, but I'm not going to beat myself up over it, because when you write YA, it's almost a necessity that you have to have a romantic interest. But I am proud of the fact that I've written lots of great female characters, I believe. But one that I'll mention was the older sister of the protagonist, who signed up for a very dangerous excursion, a very dangerous expedition, we'll say. And she signed up as well, strictly to protect him, and was super annoyed at him. Like, my idiot younger brother signed up for this thing, and, God damn it, now I have to too. And I'm going to protect him, and he's going to get home safely, God damn it. And, she had a love interest who went on the expedition as well. And she was just rip-roaringly funny about how distracting the love interest was to what her mission was, which is to protect her brother. And she never let the love interest, come ahead of her goal. It was always to protect her brother. But there was a lot of humor between, her and him. And it was just, I thought it was very much like there was never any, like, what is the test again, Marty? What's it?
The Bechdel test.
Yes,
The Bechdel test.
It never failed that test, because she was always had her priorities straight, was always super smart and funny and brave and capable, and just happened to this is really annoying that I'm really being distracted by how hot this guy is, like that kind of thing. And I just had a lot of fun with it. So I think that's an interesting way to go about it. Definitely your female characters should have goals that are above, getting with the guy. We'll put it that way.
Okay. Any last final thoughts?
Yeah, there's a quote that I've always liked, and it's this: remember, Ginger Rogers did everything that Fred Astaire did, only backwards and in high heels.
Nice. My final thought might be a controversial one, because one of the more modern stereotypes for female characters, everyone, is that all women love books and reading and collecting books and being bookish. And then if they collect enough books, if they do that, Christian Grey will be into them. And that is the moral. So, not true. I know that many women do love books, and that's awesome. Keep loving books, but you don't need to love books to find your love interest, or that even you don't have to have a love interest. So, books or no books. That's where
My
I'm
final
at.
point would be just respect your female characters.
Mm-hmm.
Respect them. Don't, look down on them. Don't write them so that they're flat, so that they're oversimplified, because women are definitely not that. So that's my final tip. And I guess that's it for tonight. And I guess we'll see you next time.